Hello, everyone. I am back with Techtonica. Today, I want to talk about the game's story and what we know so far and what the mysteries are. For one thing, I don't expect I'm the only person that has picked up on the hints that the game drops, and I've been wondering what everyone else has been thinking about this. Um, before we dive in, I wanted to make sure that we talk a little bit about the caveats of going through this. Um, this is still very fairly early access, and so we don't know to what extent things are missing or what is in right now that is going to change. There's definitely, like, it could go both ways where some things change completely or are removed entirely, or there's a lot that could be added later on. We just don't know. Also, this is a game. There are some things that are just done simply because of uh, limitations in development. um, you know, Time to develop something, the maybe having the budget to develop it, or maybe it just doesn't fit the overall vision. Sometimes these are things that get worked out through development, and so there could be things that don't make details that don't make it into the game that would make sense in the story just because they don't fit the time budget or vision of the game. Um, And lastly, I could have missed something. I am by no means perfect, or nor do I have a, but I do follow it a little bit, and I think I picked up on some things, and I have a theory about what's happening and what we're gonna see next. Um, Before I forget, I also want to mention that this is going to include some spoilers for the game story. Obviously, if you want to find the story points by yourself, then this is not a video you should be watching. I recommend playing the game, finding out the story, and then coming back and watching this. Interesting things here, of course, is the cube. That's weird. It's also one of the only bodies that we ever see. We don't even see any broken environment suits or broken helmets or any suit pieces lying around, really. That could mean something, or it could be part of the story. Maybe everyone left, or maybe it's just a dev decision to keep the area sort of clean and not too grim looking by littering it with bodies. Um, or maybe they just haven't had the time to put them in, and they plan to do that later. I don't know. But it's interesting. By the way, there's an interesting note that when you pick up the cube from Sparks, she calls herself an alien cube. Um, yeah, interesting, right? Anyways, later on, you find another body and another cube, and so we have two named characters and two bodies. So these characters talk to you. They have names, and they themselves they make reference to two more names that we have yet to find, and presumably they will be revealed in later um, patches. But there's Snowman and Pacific. Snowman is the head of IT. There's a mention of him possibly spying on everyone. So that might be interesting because he might know more about what's going on since he was potentially spying on people, or possibly the facility. He might have seen something interesting. And then Pacific is talked about when we try to ride the elevator up and we get stopped. So Pacific is what they call a flag officer, and he apparently is one of the highest ranking people on the planet at this point, if he survived. So he presumably knows something about what happened, if anyone else does. So it'd be interesting to find him. Because finding him probably is going to reveal some more of the story. Um, anyways, moving on. One of the other things that becomes obvious as you talk to to Sparks and the Colonel, is that their memory is not complete. And the way they talk about it, it feels like they've possibly been altered, or maybe their memory has just degraded, either through the whatever process put them into the cube in the first place, or possibly just through time, or maybe something else happened. It's really not clear. But both of them make a mention of things that of not remembering things until they see something, or possibly remembering half of something but not the other thing. So, for example, Sparks is talking about how you're gonna get to a city that there's gonna be 1,000 lights. She expects hundreds of people, and instead you find the Victor station. She doesn't seem to recognize Victor. She doesn't make any. She refers to it as the station, and she was obviously expecting a population of here that is just not there. Not only is it not there, we don't find any ruins or um, buildings that would indicate that there was ever a city there, which is kind of weird. She definitely seems to think that it was there. Um, so either we are not where she thinks we are, or the city was completely dismantled for some reason. Um, what makes that super weird too is that there's all kinds of other ruins, right? So it's definitely like there's definitely ruined buildings around, but nothing that looks like a city, and she never talks about it again. Um, so that's interesting. The colonel mentions knowing a lot of classified information, but he doesn't recall the reasoning of what he remembers. Um, the implication is that he maybe doesn't approve of what he's remembering, but also he knows that um, he did approve of it at some point, and therefore there must be a good reason for it because he seems like a very logical sort of a character. Um, but yeah, the implication is that he is remembering some things that are unpleasant, but he has not revealed what those things are yet, which is interesting. But again, he doesn't remember. He doesn't remember half of what he remembers, if that makes sense. Um, anyways, there's another interesting tidbit that maybe ties into this, and that is when you find that building that has been partially crushed by a rock. When you find that Sparks makes a comment that for this to happen, that rock would have to be pushing against that the protection zone, which is what prevents you from destroying those buildings with the mole for a long time. She doesn't even know how long it would take, but she thinks it would take a long time. And the unspoken implication there is that maybe it's been years. And when you think about the state of the ruined buildings you find, how there's kind of like almost things growing on them, and there's broken structures, um, it makes you think that maybe it really has been years and years since humanity left, and you wake up, which is interesting. I don't know what that means necessarily yet, obviously, but point of note. Um, so the questions are, why weren't Sparks and the Colonel in stasis if you were in stasis? Which is basically what seems to be the case. How long has it been since the disaster and everyone's left? So moving on, um, when we hear Sparks and the Colonel talking, they refer to other sectors. Sparks in particular mentions that an interesting tidbit about power and how in other sectors getting power is can be hazardous because of things that are burning or maybe there's poison gas. Um, so it makes it sound like the first sector that we're in, hydroelectric power generation is easy and potentially it's much easier than in other sectors. And that makes me wonder if that's why they ask you to generate all of these accumulators. It could be that we're going to have a way of transferring power between sectors, and later on, when we move to another sector, um, it's harder to get power there, and so you need to get power from the first sector somehow. Um, there is it basically also hints at the game having different biomes, and one confirmation we have of that is that when we look at the roadmap, they show the very top of a box for version 0.4, and it's called Desert Mirage. And there's no detail on this yet, because the rest of the box is hidden. Um, and of course, there's no date on it, although my guess is maybe early summer 2024. I'm not really sure. But with the rate at which we've been getting patches, that's kind of what I would think. But again, this is a team of people working together. I really have no idea the cadence. I'm just trying to not disappoint myself. So yeah, so my guess is we'll be able to ride the freight elevator to one of or more maybe different areas of Calix, and some of them or maybe all of them will have different and harsher environments. Um, I'm expecting that because we can fill up resources into the freight elevator, and because it's called a freight elevator, I'm going to guess that there's maybe different resources available in other sectors, and that we have to make up any shortfalls through the freight elevator. I am hoping or thinking that the easiest way to do this if they allow us to travel back and forth between sectors, but I'm not sure if that's going to be the case. It could be one of those games that just prevents you from traveling between sectors for whatever reason. And so maybe there's some other mechanic as to how you're going to get resources out of your freight elevator. I don't know. Yeah, so I think there's one other big mystery that we have been introduced to, and why do we have these two cubes, right? What's going on with Calix? Um, there's all this life and stability inside the planet. That seems highly improbable, right? I mean, we on Earth, we have definitely found life in caves within the crust of Earth, which is barely scratching. Yeah, so that leaves, I think, one other mystery, and it might be related to why we have the two cubes. But the question is, what is really going on with Kalis? Why is it that we're finding all this life and stability inside the planet? And in fact, according to Sparks, we're very close to the core of the planet. Whereas if you were on Earth and you tried to dig to the core of the planet, you wouldn't make it because the conditions would be so harsh. Talk about high pressure environment, extreme heats, no breathable air. Um, would just be very difficult. Not to mention that the deepest we have dug so far has barely scratched the surface of Earth's crust. Um, like I thought, the to put it into relative terms, the deepest hole on Earth is 12 kilometers deep, and the Earth's crust is about 100 kilometers thick, and the core is 5,000 kilometers down. So we have barely scratched the surface on Earth. And going that far down into a planet would be difficult. So what's going on in Calix? Why is it so different? Um, there's plant life growing down here. Um, Definitely strange. Uh, there's also the fact that if you dig around enough, if you explore, you're eventually going to come across this artificial looking mesh that keeps you from moving beyond a certain point. It's typically around water. I found that if you follow the underground rivers and you dig through to be able to follow the water all the way to the end, um, you'll eventually come across this mesh, and it's also at the bottom of the circular well with the research station. And if, anyways, you're able to scan it, and when you do scan it, you get a comment from Sparks that where she calls it great stone, and she says that no human knows how to damage it. It sure looks artificial. The placement is suggestive of intent because it blocks access to the core, seemingly. Um, the crazy game idea is that eventually we will be able to destroy it and get to the core, but I don't know. It could also be just like a sort of a gameplay way of blocking areas without putting in an invisible wall or something. But I find that unlikely because you could just design your game differently. You could just have dirt there, and it wouldn't like. There's no reason to have the grate in there unless you're trying to have a grate in there. So I think it's very likely part of the story in some way, um, whether it's a major way or a minor way. I don't know yet. And then there's also the monolith, right? Well, after you upgrade Victor enough, you are going to get a waypoint, and that waypoint is going to take you to a sort of a dish-looking area in the well, it looks like a dish in the map, and inside it is this monolith. And your suit warns you that there's an unknown entity that has been detected. And Coronel or Sparks have a conversation, and they don't seem to recognize it at all. And in fact, the Coronel thinks that we need a protection zone around it so that we don't put any machinery in contact with the monolith. He seems to think that would be a bad idea. But it turns out there's already one present. So that's interesting too, because why is there one present? Who put it there? The area that you dig into doesn't have any other caves leading in and out of it. So we seem to be the first ones that have dug into that area. So how could there be a pre-existing zone of protection around this thing? Who knows? Maybe it is so large that it penetrates various different sectors, and that's how you get to see it in multiple places. So we have a weird monolith, a great stone, alien cubes. Everything is hinting that there might be some non-terrestrial intelligence at work at some level on Calix. Maybe Calix isn't just a rogue planet. Maybe it was some sort of wandering alien vessel somehow. Um, anyways, it seems that when this wandering rogue planet made its way close to Earth, Earth sent some sort of expeditionary force. And that force found a lot of resources that were needed on Earth very badly. This Earth was having some sort of crisis and shortages, whatnot. So we get this expeditionary force sent to exploit Helix, and at some point, something happened. It caused almost everyone to leave, or possibly something else. Um, and some individuals didn't make it, and now they've been turned into alien cubes, except our character, who was for some reason suspended in stasis, it seems. Um, but for some reason, we wake up. The game starts at that point. But why did we wake up? Um, what happened? Was something sleeping in Calix that woke up when we started to mine it? And did it chase us away from the planet? Um, did that force make those cubes, or was this some sort of human invention that we just haven't found out about yet? Um, if there was a force down in Calix, are we gonna wake it up again? I don't know. It's these are interesting questions. I guess we're going to find out in the coming months what's going to happen. Um, I, for one, I'm very much looking forward to it. If you guys have found any other mysteries that I haven't mentioned, um, please do let me know. I'd love to check them out in the game. Um, Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe. See you guys on the next one.